Today, let's talk about what's going to be steeping and brewing for y'all today. So, we're going to be talking about your TA process and some elements that are going to help you keep you informed for where you are right now in the middle of this year. So, we've got observations that are coming in right now. So, if you do have observations on your application, you're in kind of like prime time seeing all this data come in. But if you're more of a summative kind of person, if that's what's on your application, then your summative data, you're kind of on the cusp of that coming in, but we still want to make sure we're getting you some ideas on things to be checking right now. So definitely hoping to steep you in lots of elements and then fill your cup with best practices as always. The jokes and the puns only get better, my friends. So our agenda is we're going to talk a little tea time, data analysis, teacher observation, and student growth. We're also going to talk about our problem of practice with you guys. As always, if you have questions, please ask them, especially with our great group we have today. It's kind of just like a nice little small group instruction, which we know is like so nice. So please ask questions in our Q&A window or give shout outs in the chat. So let's start with our tea time, shall we? So like we said earlier, I am Dr. Allison Ross. A little bit about me here. We do try to change our information for each one of these webinars. So what is a professional book you find yourself returning to? For me, it is The Art of Coaching by the Elena Aguilar. I do have her new book, so she did retire this book, but I keep going back to this book, Scott. I just love this book so much. My favorite tea right now is Mandarin ginger tea. I got it at HEB. It's delicious. And I'm not a big Mandarin person, but this one was so good. And my New Year activity is, and I don't think I've told you this, Scott, but I go to these dance classes at Diva Dance, and we have been asked to perform in the Spurs halftime show when the Spurs play at Moody Center here in Austin in February. So yes, I am going to be dancing in an NBA halftime show. That is my New Year activity. It is something, it's kind of like a bucket list thing. So I was like, you know what? In your 40s, we do these things. So that's what I'm up to. What about you? What are you reading? What are you going back to? And what's your activity, Scott?
Yeah, it was hard for me to come up with one book, but I did limit it to two because there's tons of so many good books that I keep coming back to. But probably the traditional one is a book called The Fifth Discipline, which is really about systems thinking and organizations. And it's a really amazing book, but more practical and more related to what we're talking about today. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Is this wonderful book on how to give really good feedback, and it's called Radical Candor.
Mm,
We'll explain more later in the webinar what radical candor is. Uh,
we are, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was just going to share my tea as well because I'm a calm tea, and I love my chamomile lavender tea. It's very soothing, especially on these cold days.
Scott, can you share with our callers today what your mug says? It
Oh yes,
deserves.
you can see that. I'm not sure if you can see that, but let's
It's
see if I can hold it without. Oh, there we go.
it's Nicolas Cage and it says, "You're my national treasure."
With Valentine's Day right around the corner. That was a wonderful gift from my wife a couple of Valentine's days ago. I'm a big Nick Cage fan. She is not, so it was a joke.
Any Nick Cage fans today? Join us on the chat. And then you're playing some softball. So that sounds
Yeah,
like
that's come up. I'm training with my daughter to start the season. It's awful cold to be playing softball out these days, but we're making it work.
right. We're gonna make it work. Oh, I love it. Well, let's get down to do what's in the brew. So let's start off with a question. Rate your familiarity with Strive tools for data analysis. So I'm going to pop this into the into a poll, doing all the clicks. There we go. So, how familiar are you with Strive tools for data analysis and reporting? Um, Zero is limited knowledge and or use. Four is well versed in routine use. But this kind of gives us like a really nice view of like where are you? Where how we can we support this with on our team here at Eduphoria? I'm seeing perfect. Oh, and we're getting great participation from our attendees. Thank you so much. So it's actually like a really nice, like across the board, like a nice scatter of different skills and abilities. Okay, good to know. I'm gonna give 2 more seconds for everyone to respond. All right. And we're gonna end this poll and then let's share the results. So kind of again, all across the board, we've got some folks that are like, yes. And then some folks that are like, I would like to know more. We're hoping that this time you'll be able to really have, you'll be able to grasp onto some new ideas on how you can really use Strive tools for your data analysis and reporting. And as always, if anything we have today resonates with you and like you've got questions, please reach out. We are so happy to work with you guys on getting and moving you up that that familiarity pole. All right. So let me go back out of here. So today we're also going to be talking about another problem of practice. And so we're going to introduce it right now for y'all. During the district quarterly data walk, you hear a principal share how their teachers use a variety of student growth metrics across the school. As you sip your tea, you wonder if it is time for your TIA process to grow from multiple student growth methodologies. So adding in new growth methodologies into your application. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but April 15th is going to be that deadline, folks, for TIA. So, for submitting changes to your application. So kind of keep that in mind. All that information is listed on TIA's website. But we're going to talk a little bit about what that would look like if that's something you're interested in. All right, so let's talk about data analysis. So as you can see, we've got this beautiful chart here that talks about what that collection looks like throughout the year. We're in the middle of the year, so we're monitoring progress. We're seeing beautiful data come in. We're acknowledging, are we looking at our observation? Are we looking at our summative data? Was it what we're turning in? And we're monitoring those as they come in. And today we're going to talk about different ways to analyze trends that we're seeing in our data. We can also start doing comparisons to really help you start looking at your data as it rolls in. So one of our great reports for trend analysis in your data is going to be this beautiful document summary. So this is really great for walkthrough analysis. This is very conducive to checkbox type questions. So if you're looking for a walkthrough and you want to make it simplified with checkboxes because you're looking for trends, this is a really great report to analyze what's happening in those walkthroughs that have checkbox questions. You can also, when you pull this report, just like a lot of our other reports, you can hover over the bar and it'll give you that percentage. You can also be looking for more granular topics. So where and what dimensions am I excelling in, or where am I seeing limited data on certain dimensions? So with all of these great things, and we talked about this, if you're one of my friends that I met on Friday in Waco, please give me a shout out in the chat. I would love to know that you're here. But we talked about how, these reports are a really great place to start asking questions on how we're moving, especially now we're in the middle of the year. We need to be asking questions of what is working and what isn't working when it comes to reaching our goals for our data. Another awesome report for us to look at is going to be detailed analysis. So you can actually monitor your ratings in real time. And there's different ways, as I say, to slice and dice the different views in here. So here we're looking at the different domains by appraisees. And we can start kind of seeing, okay, we've got this many documents in, and this is their score for in the domains 2 and 3. You can also select dimensions or totals in the columns. You can group them by campus, by feeder pattern, by subject. We know that grade level is probably where we want to look at data for our elementary folks, but when we shift to secondary, we know that our subjects are going to be a little bit more of a popular topic for us to look at whenever we're slicing and dicing our data to find things like calibration and skew. If those are words you're like, what you talking about, Willis? Please go see our other 2 webinars that talk about how calibration and skewness need to be identified and what to do if you find them. All right. And then we're getting up to the point where it's time to check. So your teacher performance and student growth correlation comes from your summative documents as well as your student growth goal management. And this is where you get to see that beautiful scatter plot. This is the same check that Texas Tech runs on your data when you submit your spreadsheet. And so you're getting about that time as your data rolls in, and maybe you're starting the summative conversations probably late February, early March. Is it time to start checking your data? So whenever the slides come out, if you'll notice at the bottom, we have all these awesome supporting online help guide articles to really anchor your next steps in utilizing these reports. And then if you're going, Allison, I really need to know more about these reports, we do offer a great training called Strive Appraisal Analysis and Reports. We always, with every training we do here at Eduphoria, we customize this to meet your needs for your district. And so if this is something that you're like, I would be really interested in getting an analysis and reports training for me and my TIA team, please reach out to us, training@eduphoria.net. We're so happy to get you connected and set that up for you. All right, so just curious, what reports are y'all using? I do have a poll for this one, but I'm curious to know what reports you're utilizing the most right now. So let's see. Make sure I get the right question. Yes, this is it. All right, so there's the question up there. We'll give you guys a few seconds to respond. We go fast on these questions. Okay, I'm seeing some different data come in for these. Right. And I'm just gonna check the chat while we're there. Oh, perfect. Y'all can see, oh, people are building snowmans, and thank you to those that have been putting snowmans in the chat. Snowmen, snow peoples. And yes, Paige is in the chat. Our great Paige Parker is in the chat as well, answering those questions for y'all today. Another support, she is my other half here on the Strive team. So if you ever write in asking Strive questions, it's going to be myself or the great Paige Parker answering your TIA needs. All right, so we're seeing a little bit of use, not as much use on document summary. Okay. We do see some detailed analysis. Detailed analysis is getting some love for sure. And then student growth and teacher performance correlation. I'm curious though, is there, with the student growth and teacher performance correlation, is the use not, are you, do you have summative in your application, or are you using observations? Because that's what I'm curious about for that particular report, if you want to pop that in the chat. But if you're like, I just want to sip my tea, that's also a really good option as well. All right, gonna give it about 10 more seconds before I close the poll. Still a few more clicks. All right. All right, gonna go ahead and end the poll. And then I'll share the results so y'all can see what everyone's using. All right. Okay, so we talked a little bit about those reports. Let's start putting those pieces together with other elements of our TIA for today. So let's talk teacher observation. So in your calibration timeline, we talk a little bit about, where are you at in the timeline as far as teacher observation is concerned. Right now, we are in right around, we just finished our mid-year observations, our formal observations, and we're kind of starting to look at, do we have evidence added to our goals, teachers? Do we have evidence added to our appraisal process, teachers? Appraisers, have you added your evidence and uploaded it? So we're beginning to make sure that we're really adding those things in now because nobody wants to be adding those things in at the last minute in April. But if you're like, yes, Allison, I do add everything in at the last minute in April, there is space for you here as well. We totally understand. So let's talk about adding effective feedback. So the big, here's the secret to helping teachers grow and meeting your TIA needs. It's good feedback. So let's talk about the spaces where you can add good feedback. And then Scott's going to talk about actually crafting that feedback to help people grab their goals that they are trying to reach on their application for teacher observation and the growth in that area. So the first spot is going to be in your template. So in your template, you've got the dimensions, then you've got a spot for evidence. This is a really good time, and especially using scripted notes, but you can use scripted notes to type in what you're observing, and then you can add those into your evidence. A lot of times during your observations and during your formal observations and your summatives, it is a great idea to make sure you're giving lots of evidence to support what you're rating. We never want to leave our appraisees going, I don't understand how they came up with that. So this is a good spot in just in your templates to add that evidence box. If you're like, hey, I don't really want to make this from scratch, we got you covered. This templates with the evidence boxes are available in our Eduphoria community. And if you're like, Allison, what is an Eduphoria community? There's a link down there at the bottom that's going to get you that information. You will love it. Let's also talk about adding effective feedback. So you go into your observation or your summative, and you can click on scripted notes, and I call that or scripted comments. That's going to be like your personal notepad. And if you've ever done a training with me for appraisers, you've heard me talk about your personal notepad. So you can go in and not have to scroll through the entire template looking for, well, does this apply here? Does this activity really mean dimension 3 or is this more for dimension 2? You can actually just go in, open up the scripted comments and just listen. Just old school listening and scripting like we all learned in undergrad, right? When we were learning to be teachers, just going in and scripting, and then you can take that back to your office. It auto saves, so you can take that back to your office, look at your notes, drop in comments, like either drag and drop, or you can copy paste comments from scripted comments to view so that the teacher could view them. However, your scripted comments it's your personal notepad. So no one will see what you type in there. Once you move it over to the comment box, that's whenever the appraisee would see it. So little trick there. I actually loved as an administrator, I loved this piece, the scripted comments, because before that, we're all carrying legal pads and just writing. So I really like this element. And then you can also add your effective feedback in. It comes in on the summative panel. So when you're doing your summit appraisers, this is for you. When you're doing those summatives and you've got them come in fast and furious, you can pull up the summative panel and it will give you an aggregated look at the appraisee's performance for each dimension, and also give you those comment boxes that were filled in during a walkthrough or an observation where you can drag and drop evidence into the summative. So we have made this summative simple for you. This is one of our really great tricks of the trade. Actually, I talked to some good friends of mine. I met new friends on Friday and I showed them the summative panel and they were like, oh my gosh, this is everything. So I love whenever the summative panel is discovered or rediscovered, and it makes everyone's life easier. So just another element for adding effective feedback. And then we also have messages. Messages is also a time saver in that the conversation, every document we have in our appraisal system has a messages feature. Your goals, your walkthroughs, your observations, your summatives. You can go in and message your appraiser back and forth. And this is so important because this keeps everyone on the same page. And it also keeps you from having to not dig up an email thread because nobody likes that business. Nobody likes digging in an inbox. I mean, if you do, love that for you, but not one of my hobbies. So I love that messages can be kept here on this document so that everybody's on the same page. It's time stamped. We know who's talking, and you can start that rich dialogue about the observation or whichever applicable document you're in. So, Scott, we learned how to put the effective feedback in. Can you talk to us about what to say? Because sometimes that is the biggest piece is like, what words do I say to really move the needle on teacher observation, student growth, approaching our goals?
Yeah. And before we get started on that, let's just talk about how we go about collecting that feedback, because that's really important, right? And there's a difference between how we're going to collect feedback in this comprehensive way for a full evaluation and how we do our walkthroughs, right? These smaller, shorter times that we're in classrooms that are really important, that keeps that feedback loop open and builds the trust with your teachers that you see them and you know what they're doing. This isn't a huge time commitment, but it's so important that you do this. And so, really, a big strategy around how to do this is just make it a habit, right? Like, you need to be doing this, and you should be doing this in groups when possible, at least a couple of people, 3 people, because having those conversations is really important afterwards, right? So make it a habit, go with others, right? Use the data, right, from the document summary and the ratings and the detailed analysis report to kind of know what it is we're going for and what we might focus on. And speaking of focus, don't try to look at everything at once. There's a lot of things you can look at. So have a focus and keep that focus consistent across appraisers for different periods of time. What do we want to see all of our teachers doing well in all of our classrooms? What does quality instruction look like, right? So how long? These are quick, right? Walkthroughs, these quick observations, 5, maybe 7 minutes tops. Don't linger, right? Because then I can get in more. I can make sure I'm seeing all of my teachers. And when you're in there, this is about coaching, right? I'm not evaluating you. I want to help. I want to see how we can improve practice. That's really the goal here, right? This is a human business. If you
Yeah.
can just make a touch point in person with someone, maybe they're off period, maybe later when you just see them passing, oh, hey, it was great to be in your classroom. It's not, you don't need to give them all the feedback, but just to acknowledge their humanity in person is a great way. And then using those messaging tools, using those feedback tools in Eduphoria don't seem so out of the blue, right? And so it just
Right.
feels more personal. It's hard to do. It's not always possible to do it in the same day, but maybe the next day or whenever, right? Make sure that you're putting that data into Eduphoria either directly, or if you are wanting to use your legal pad still, make sure that you're transcribing it over while it's still fresh in your head, because again, you're frantically typing and you want to keep that context, right? And so, really, the way that we hold each other accountable, yourself, your leaders, right, is really to think about, okay, now how do we use this data? Let's talk about this and let's talk about it in productive ways. So if we're in meetings and we're talking about, well, what are we going to do? What kind of professional development we want? Who needs extra support? What kinds of support? We do that in our meetings, and we coordinate amongst each other so people aren't getting hit in all directions with different things from different people, right? Coordinate, as I said before, your time together, put it on the calendar, make it important. These things always are the things that you move because the fire happens. Don't make these the priority, right? So, and then schedule that coaching and feedback time. Eduphoria is a great tool to keep that going. And so making sure you get that on the calendar, that you're going to also know when I'm going to give feedback or when I'm going to sit and have some coaching time follow up. So all of this is really important for you to remember as far as how do we collect the information so that we can use it for effective feedback. So what does effective feedback look like? Well, go to the next slide and I will tell you. So as I mentioned before, one of my favorite books is a book called Radical Candor. And there's this great little 4-quadrant piece here you can talk about, right? And so what are these quadrants and what does it mean? So let's start over on the top left quadrant there, ruinous empathy. This is what I would say most of us in education are guilty of. We don't want to make people feel bad. So we do not tell them that they have spinach in their teeth, right? And it's not okay. You really want to be told. If you had spinach in your teeth, you would want someone to tell you, right? And so what happens with ruinous empathy is we care about this person so much, but we don't actually challenge them directly. We don't tell them what's going on. We sugarcoat our feedback because, oh, we don't want them to feel bad, right? but that's not being clear or being honest with people. And clear is kind, right? That's just the way it is. And it minimizes the feedback we're going to ultimately give people. Okay, but you don't want to be in the bottom left if you don't, and if you don't have to be, because that's really what she calls, Kim Scott, manipulative insincerity, right? It's unclear, it's unkind, it's basically passive aggressive behavior, right? It's we're not really doing that, and we definitely don't want to be in the bottom right quadrant and be overly, like, brutally honest with people and just obnoxious about it, right? We don't want to do that. Oh my God, like, you can't even eat, there's spinach in your teeth, right? Like, you don't want to be a jerk about it, right?
Right.
Being direct, but you don't have the heart or the care to care about someone's feelings. So where do we want to be? We really want to be in the top right with what the title of the book is, which Kim Scott calls radical candor, right? You care personally, you challenge directly. Clear, kind, direct. First, let them know you care about them, and then people might be open to the feedback, right? Say what you think, but also give a damn about the person you're saying it to, right? Like, don't just be obnoxious about it. And so, right, so we all want to know that. We might lean over and say, hey, there's spinach in your teeth, right? Or whatever, right? Because we want to know, we want to care, we don't want to embarrass people, and we don't want to put them on the spot. So if you have a chance to look at anything Radical Candor, there's lots of really great videos online. It's a great book. It's a great way to sort of understand how we can be in that care personally challenge directly when we're giving feedback, but it's also a great thing to follow. So how can you be specific and sincere, right? So, like, what does that mean, specific and sincere? Well, get really clear, right, about how you want to help, right? Don't just tell them don't focus on what's wrong, focus on how to get better, right? And give your intention, like, I want to help you, I care about you, and I want you to be better. We all want to be better. This isn't about slamming you or being judgy, right? And show them what you mean. Don't just tell them, right? Show them what it looks like to do that better, right? And for all of us, finding help is better than sort of offering it yourself. So if you can direct them, hey, you should go see this teacher, or you should check out this resource, rather than just telling them what to do, right? Feedback is a gift. This is just one of the most wonderful things to remember. It is a wonderful gift when it's given well, right? It's not meant to be a whip, and it's not meant to sort of be a carrot. It's just a gift, right? And a great little methodology to remember when you're giving feedback, just as an acronym, is this SBI acronym, right? Give the context of the feedback. Be specific about, like, what the situation was. When you were discussing this with your students, right? You sounded really angry, or whatever it is, right? The behavior, like, say what was done. Don't personalize it, right? Don't make it about the person, make it about the behavior. That type of tone might put your students off a little bit. Maybe you should, think about that as you're going. I know that you're stressed and trying to get through it, right? And then what is the consequence that's most meaningful, right? What's the impact that you're looking for? If you just soften your voice, kids will be more engaged, right? And they're likely to respond, right? And so that's really what you want to really think about when you being specific and sincere. So let's hear what my friend Simon Sinek has to say about being specific and sincere in giving feedback, because he explains this really well.
So one of the things that we do is creating a culture in which people understand that the reason we're giving feedback is not to quote unquote criticize them, but to help them grow as human beings. And that has to be established. Like, this is what the advice I offer is, it's not just a checklist that you do and everything goes fine. You create a culture in which difficult conversations and critical feedback are welcomed, or at least understood. But it's also how we give it. Usually we give it by pulling out a piece of paper and pointing out the thing that's wrong. And saying, you got to fix something, right? We usually point to the evidence first. As opposed to starting by the human being, which is, there's stuff I want to share with you. I don't know what it means, but I wanted to raise it with you in case there is an issue. because I care about you and I want to see that you grow here. But there's some evidence that things are going a little sideways, and I want to address them with them to see what opportunities there are, or if there's anything wrong, because I don't know the reasons behind it. But here's, for example, the way you talked to your teammates the other day was a little harsh. And ordinarily, I'd be one to say, "Oh, you're having a bad day. It's no problem. Everybody gets a bad day." But you've been really beating up on people. I don't even know if you were aware of that, right? And sometimes they'll say, "I'm having a hard time," and it opens up, or they'll say, "I wasn't even aware. I didn't even know," or it reveals something, as opposed to saying, "Stop yelling at people. Nobody wants to work for you if all you do is yell at people." It's hard for people to receive, and so good feedback is not just about conveying the point we're trying to make. It's about creating a condition in which the person is more likely to listen and hear it. So we're all proud of ourselves once we've told them, did you give her the feedback? Yeah, I told her, right? Did they hear the feedback? Different question.
Yeah, and that's just wonderful. Again, it's about the person, right? Let's not lose track. This is about the person, right? If you were with us at our last webinar, we went through a little bit of this continuum of coaching, right? And this is, you can see a bi-directional arrow at the bottom there, right? So we give feedback and coaching in different ways for different circumstances, right? And while we want to really try to stay on the left as much as possible, we want people to talk, right? We want the person, we don't want to be the ones doing all the talking when we're coaching someone or giving feedback. We want people to recognize their own things and be able to do most of the talking, right? And so in that position, we're doing mostly listening and asking questions, right? But that's not always going to work with everyone, because sometimes people don't know what to say and don't know how to talk, right? And so the idea of this continuum is we move a little bit to the right as we need to, right? So maybe we do it together. Hey, I see you don't have any ideas. Let's talk about how together. Let's brainstorm ideas. Let's come up with this together. Well, maybe they don't really have any ideas and can't really contribute. And so maybe they're new. Maybe it's just a new situation, right? And so now maybe I'm going to be a little bit more directing, right? And I'm going to give them information. So here, check this out. Read this. Look at this video, right? And then we'll talk about it. It's more of a teaching stance. And you know what? Sometimes people are so new or so confused, you really just kind of have to tell them what to do, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? It happens sometimes. But we always then want to start moving back to the left as we can, right? And so none of these are bad or good. They're just different ways to approach coaching in different situations, right? And so what does that really mean for us? If you go to the next slide, what that means is that when we're on the left side, you're listening in a way that people want to talk to you. You're asking those questions, you're focused on them, you're really, really hearing them. And we'll talk a little bit about what good listening is, right? And when you have to be in that sort of talking mode, when you have to be more directive, you're speaking in the ways, like Simon Sinek was telling us, you're speaking in ways that aren't harsh, that aren't judgmental, but that people want to hear that, right? It's helpful, it's supportive, it's caring, right? Caring personally, challenging directly, right? And so that's really an important way to remember this continuum. And so if you go to the next slide, you can see like there are specific ways that we can do this. And here are just some suggested questions, right? And these are great to have in your pocket. It's great to have some sentence starters, like what questions do I ask? It's hard to ask questions, right? But if you come preloaded with questions and you want to be in the coaching mode, you can ask those questions to get people to talk, right? So these are questions that are designed to get people to give you information, right? And don't just respond to their answer. Ask another question. Ask another question. Ask another question. Right? You don't have to go to talking. You can keep them talking as much as possible. Well, if you have to be collaborative, how do you bring people into a collaboration? And if you have to be directive, how do you do that with kindness, with clarity, right? Being specific and sincere, right? And so you're not telling them what to do. You're asking them, can I offer you something? Can I, right? And so you're asking for permission almost to be able to tell them what to do, right? So it's not just telling them what to do, right? And so if you go to the next slide, we can really think about, like, you know, what is the core of this? None of us, nobody wants to be told what to do. That's really the core of it. I mean, you're sitting there. I don't think so. I mean, it's not just my teenage daughter that does not want to be told what to do. Nobody does, right? We don't. But people are open to changing their behavior when you can convince them that personally, like, change needs to happen, right? And that takes time and it takes care. When they're coming up with their own insights, that's why questioning and listening is so powerful, right? And you're asking for that permission, right? So they genuinely seek that input. I really could use some examples. I really would like to see what this looks like, right? And so much better, right? Because telling people what to do doesn't work. So how do you listen? It's okay. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So how do you listen, right? And so listening is a skill, right? And it's not easy because we want to say the thing and we don't have a lot of time, right? And maybe someone did something really dumb and you just need to tell them about it, but you have to, like, hold, right? And so seek first when you're listening to understand, right? That's your intent, right? And then the skill with seeking first to understand is reflecting back, right? So they just said something. So instead of just jumping right into the next thing, I'm reflecting back what you just said. I hear that you feel that you're stressed about kids not listening, right? And then to be understood, right? So then seek to be understood when you're talking about me. I feel that when you're speaking in that tone, you know, it makes people not want to hear you, right? Mm-hmm. But using the I, right, and those I messages, and any of you that have ever been through any relationship training, right, that I message is so important. But when you really listen deeply to people, it makes all the difference in the world, right? And so when you think about what does that look like? What are these levels? These 3 levels of listening, right? So there's these ways that we can think about different ways that we listen. If you go to the next slide, we can see, you know, that there's these different ways that we can think about it, right? And when we're at level 1 listening, we're really focused on our own thoughts. We're kind of coming up with the answer as they're talking, and we're not really paying attention to what they're saying, right? And I am so guilty of that all the time because I love to talk and come up with ideas and, you know, fix things, right? But that's not good listening, right? Level 2 is you're strongly focused, right? But you're not really connecting with them. You kind of are nodding, saying, yeah, I get it. But again, you're not really hearing them and their body language and kind of all of the things that they're saying, right? Level 3 is really where you want to be. This idea of expansive listening, or, you know, what's in this particular book they call 360-degree listening, right? It's not only focused on, like, what is that person saying, but, like, how are they saying it? Are they crossing their arms and leaning back? Or what they're not saying, they're kind of silent and they're not actually even responding, right? And, you know, you can see when people get energized and excited and you want to capitalize on that, or when they're feeling standoffish and you want to be a little more sensitive, right? And so really focusing on how can I stay at level 3? And it's, y'all, no one's there all the time, right? All of these things are hard, right? But it's about thinking through and making sure that you're trying to get to that level 3 listening, that 360-degree listening, as much as possible, right? And so listening is really important, but so is trust. And one of my favorite people that talk about vulnerability and trust is Brene Brown. And you'll see there's a great video. I'm not going to go too much into this because I could talk about Brene Brown and trust all day.
Okay.
But there's a little link to a video that's super helpful. But I do want to highlight a few of these. This is just 7 steps, you know, having boundaries, being reliable, right? Like being accountable for what you say. I'll talk about some of these, the vault, and integrity, and not being judgmental, and being generous. If you go to the next slide, I just want to highlight a few of these that I think really stand out, right? And one is this idea of a vault, right? Confidence. Like, you're not going to go off and just blab everything to everybody, right? When you're building trust with someone, they need to know that like you're going to hold that information and protect it. And that goes both ways, right? And so we want to be able to have somewhat confidential conversation with people, because when it comes to our teaching and our performance, these are sensitive topics, right? And people feel personally hurt about this stuff. But if they can trust that you're not just, that this is just for us and for this conversation, it really goes a long way. So like listen, having that sense of trust and that vault really helps, because when you're protecting that confidentiality. Not being a judgy, right? Like no one wants to be judged. You can talk about things without making people feel bad. So the safe space that you create really has to be free from judgment. This isn't about judging people or evaluating people. It's about helping people grow and be better, because that's really what we all want. And then finally, when I think about a really important one, it's this idea of generosity. We're all, as I said, more comfortable helping than asking for help. It's hard to ask for help. So when you're coaching someone, fill the space with grace and generosity, right? Like, bad day, I understand. I want to understand the whole circumstance, and so it's really about fully believing in and assuming the positive intent. Everyone wants to do a good job, right? And so you have to assume that positive intent when you're coaching somebody. And so this is just a great quote, this lack of transparency, right? You need this trusting environment, right? You don't want people to feel insecure. You don't want them to feel like you're out to get them, right? We're all in this together. And that's a really important thing to remember. So.
Well, that's so much good information. Scott and I share a massive passion for coaching. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. I just love all the information, because that's literally, that's the core at really, it's like building that trust in order to like really move your teachers in the right direction, in the direction that they've set goals for themselves they've set goals for their students. It's really this conversation. It's not, I'm going to give you this rating and expect you to fix it yourself, because then we're not really leading, are we? So in that same vein, what advice do y'all have for capturing key moments and information during an observation? So this is going to be something just to put in the chat, to share out some wisdom. What advice do you have in this element of, how do you use, scripted comments, objective language, timestamps? Like, how do you use any of those pieces to provide key moments and information during an observation? If y'all want to put those in the chat, just at your leisure, and we're going to scoot along while y'all are adding those. As you're thinking about this and you're like, I kind of want to have more training on having those conversations, on where to put that into your templates as you're conducting your observations, as you're doing your appraisals. We offer Strive for Appraisers. It is a fantastic training for your administrative team, for your principals, or whoever, basically your appraisal folks, so your appraisers. It's a great training for them that we really, again, customize to what you need, but we walk them through how to provide this effective feedback. What does that coaching voice sound like, look like, appear as? Are we conveying what we need to convey? And are we using the elements of our documents in the system, in the Strive system, to really empower the appraiser, sharing that information with the appraisee? So just if that is something you're more curious about, please reach out to us. It's a great training to conduct, every few years, to really recalibrate your appraisers on your appraisal process. So next we're going to talk about student growth. Scott, tell us about our student growth for this topic, for this webinar. We've got an interesting one.
Yeah, we're going to go into this different ways to think about growth, right? And we all know that there's different circumstances with different teachers and groups of students and subjects that are being taught and the levels of the students, right? And so in almost any situation, you know, one class to another are not the same. And that's really where this idea of value added measures come in. How do we create trust in our system and create an atmosphere where things feel equitable? Because at the end of the day, TIA is about money in people's pockets, right? And that's a really sensitive topic. And you don't want people to feel like they're getting treated unfairly or not equitably based on their particular circumstances, right? And so that's a really, really important thing that we're going to go into here today with value added measures. So what are value added measures, right? There's a simple way, and if you've been in past webinars, we've talked about student learning objectives, we've talked about portfolios, which are also good ways to look at it. But value added measures, really, you have to kind of think about it in a few different ways. You have to have these three criteria, right? Like you have to be able to be able to scale this and stretch this, right? You have to make sure that it's reliable, right? And there's validity behind how we're implementing these measures. And we'll go more into what they are here in a minute. You know, but the benefits of these are that you can rely on them across your district in different circumstances, right? And, you know, within the STAR, you have these statewide protocols that also go with that. And, you know, a possible challenge is it ain't easy to come up with value added measures, right? It takes some planning. It may require some outside help a lot of times because it's hard to sort of see everything and all of the different circumstances sort of when you're in the fishbowl. It helps to have someone outside the fishbowl to help you with that, right? But it really can be used across any test, across any criteria that you have. It's not, it's not something special, but it is a little bit complex, right? And so you can see all the different ways you can do that. So why would I use this, right? I was going into that a little bit before, but it's really, this really offers this really nice statistical approach to how we measure student growth separate from teacher observation, right? And so we're looking at students in this one way, and we are observing our teachers based on that, right? And it really highlights when you have diverse populations and you have, like I said, different kids in different schools or in different classrooms, this really highlights that for you. And it really helps you focus in on what is actually this teacher's impact on this particular group of students in this particular subject, right? It helps answer some of those questions. And, the added bonus is you can really help target and personalize that professional development. So for different situations and different teachers. So how do these work? The key components of value-added measures, you sort of have this baseline of student performance, right? Mrs. Johnson teaches 5th grade math, and at the beginning of the year, her students scored, an average of 60% on the standardized math pretest, right? And you would adjust it for prior performance, demographics, other external factors like socioeconomic status or learning, their learning levels, right? And then based on this historical data and demographic adjustments, right, the predicted performance of Miss Johnson students should improve to an average score of 75%, right? And then you're looking at the actual performance. So at the end of the year, Miss Johnson students received an average of 80% on the post test, right? So blew it out of the water, right? The value added measure, right, compares the predicted performance of 75% to the actual performance of 80%, right? And it shows that Miss Johnson added 5 percentage points of growth beyond what was actually predicted, which indicates that she really had a significant and positive impact on student learning, even after accounting for these external factors, right? And that's why it's really important. A teacher in a similar context who only achieves the predicted score would still be considered effective, but wouldn't receive the same recognition, right, for the added value, right? And that's why it's called value added measures, right? Because there's this added value that you're getting based on the circumstances and going beyond what's predicted. Sounds complicated. It's complicated to set up, right? And so key considerations that you want to think about when you're implementing this is if you're going to do this, like you need to start now, starting to plan for next year and how you're going to implement that, especially if you're going to be changing up your applications. You want to make sure that everything is aligned with your district goals and whatever evaluative instrument you're using. Most people use t-tests. So like, are things aligned with what the t-test expectations are? Involve people. Like this is a group activity creating your value added measures. You can't do this in isolation. You need to involve people so that, again, the trust, fairness, openness, transparency is all there. And then sort of keep going back to it and change it, iterate over time. It's not a one and done sort of a deal, right? You have to be really strategic about it and really planning. And again, these are tough, but there's ways that can do that. And these are things that we can help you with as well if you're wanting to go down that path.
So, question for the audience. What barriers do you have getting started with VAM as a student growth measure? I don't hear a lot about VAM being used. And so I'm curious to know what y'all think, like what your thoughts are on barriers to using VAM. Again, it's not one I come across too many times as I'm having conversations with our clients here in Texas. It's very much a pre-post test kind of world out there. Okay. Well, while that is going, I'm going to give everyone a minute to put in their information or put in their thoughts. But as we're talking about VAM, we do offer trainings with our Aware. We are, Aware and Strive are better together, especially when it comes to TIA. So, if you're like, I want to know more about value added measure, or I want to optimize my system to reach this, we do offer a training on building assessments in Aware that we can customize to meet the needs of what kind of data you're trying to extract from the system, be it for TIA or other informative purposes, as you look at your goals for your own learning organization. So I'm seeing some folks still answering. That is a short answer question. So I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to leave that open. So you can put in your thoughts about your barriers to VAM. And Scott, we've got our problem of practice. Can you talk to us about our problem of practice and potential solutions?
Yeah. So again, sort of going back to this, you're hearing how their teachers are using, a variety of metrics, right? And you're wondering, how do I account for this in, in the student growth methodologies, right? And there's all sorts of different ways that we can go about thinking about sort of how we do this. And there's a different, I would say there's different approaches, right? And so we can think about these multiple growth methodologies, again, by collaborating, right? So this isn't something, I know we're wondering about this, but starting to think about, hey, should we add some of these different methodologies? Let's get together. Let's start figuring out, like, is our system fair? Are people talking about our system and saying, hey, I don't feel like I'm being treated fair? Like, what's the chatter out there, right? And so really exploring, what are people saying? Is it time to start thinking about this and doing something more? I mean, TIA is pretty straightforward. It's pretty, it has some pretty clear guidelines. We're using pre and post test, but that's not always the best way to do it. And so when are we starting to think about doing these for other things? So part of this is really thinking about, right, how do we use our existing tools? Are we calibrated, right? Are we using our tools to capture and distribute the data in ways that are equal and fair, equitable across all of our teachers, right? Who needs more support, right? Different appraisers and different evaluators and different supervisors and different coaches sometimes see things differently. So again, sort of making sure everyone's on the same page as far as implementing this. And then really thinking about the people that you would want to show, like, hey, here's a teacher or here's a leader that is doing this really well. How can we highlight what they're doing? How can we turn that isolated practice into sort of best practices for everyone? At the school level, right? When you think about at the school level, what does that mean at the school level? Thinking about that time factor again, making sure that that's really clear and thinking about when am I going to find the time to do this? It is a time consuming process, you know, starting small, right? So which are the classrooms that are best suited to start thinking about how we'll implement this with all of us? I think with TIA, we start with small groups and we grow and grow and grow and scale, right? And then again, who are those teachers that can serve as mentors, right? That really get this, that are really knocking it out of the park with this diverse group of students, right? That can help mentor others on some of these additional measures, right? And so at the teacher level, right, thinking about that, where are teachers going to keep this, right? Like, how am I going to track how my students are growing throughout the year? You know, what are the things that I'm already doing as a teacher that kind of support this, right? Because teachers, a lot of our teachers are unaware that their students are different and sit at different levels, right? So how are they already differentiating? How you already as a teacher doing some of these things that really just translate right into these additional measures? And then how do we work as a team? How do we work as a group to really, again, broaden the way that we're looking about this, understand it better, and make sure that we're all on the same page?
Right. Wow. That's a lot to think about on our problem of practice, but expanding those student growth measures, you know, sometimes really loops in more people that could benefit from TIA. So all the good things to really think about and consider. And that deadline isn't until April in a lot of ways, but it is coming up in April if you're going to change something about your application. This is just a funsy question. What vitamin is most abundant in green tea? Any pop it in the chat what you think. This isn't going to be a poll. All right. I think they're waiting for the poll. So it's vitamin C. So get that green tea in so that you got your vitamin C during these cold winter months, these gray skies. Any final questions? Go ahead and put those in Q&A if you have any final questions. But if you think of something else after today, always reach out to us, training@eduphoria.net. That goes to your training team. So whether it's a Strive, Aware, anything, you're more than welcome to email us at training@eduphoria.net. Any of the questions, we're happy to answer and connect with you. Even if it's, I don't know exactly what to ask, but so we can also help you frame those problems as well. All right. And just if you are interested in our project management for TIA, we are offering guidance, professional insights as you go through TIA implementation, data capture, and data submission. If you're interested in that, please fill out the form at the bottom of the screen. We can get in touch with you on how we can help you meet your needs and meet your goals for TIA and everything else in between, right? And then just a little bit more on a lens on what the TIA project management looks like, and the sequences of it. So again, these are solutions tailored for your TIA journey that we craft together with our in-house expertise of everyone that has, you know, been working together to help you put together your data submission. So if we can help with that, please reach out. We're happy to. And then also included with your TIA project management is Strive Appraiser Academy. So it's going to be a training session where your appraisers go through our Strive for Appraisers Academy, so that it is included in the project management as well. A nice little perk. And then if you're just looking for a training to start up in your district, Strive Audit and Consultation is another great step. If you're like, hey, Allison, I don't know what to do with our next steps, let's talk. So let's set up a time, let's talk, let's see what you need and really help you meet your goals for TIA and everything in between. And then on April 15th, with the deadline for taxes and TIA, don't miss our next webinar about the TIA journey with another problem of practice. This will be our last webinar on April 15th in this series. So we're excited for you to join us. Mark your calendars and always scan the QR code to sign up for our lovely newsletter. It has so much information and absolutely not. We do not spam our inbox. We are humans and no one likes a spammed inbox. Trust me.